Okay, so let's talk about space stations. Okay, and as always, this is going to be kind of discussed in two main factions: the United States of America and the Soviet Union. Okay? Communist hippies. Okay. So, this right here is a space station known as Skylab.
No. So what's the Skylab?
Skylab was really the first U.S. space station. It was launched in 1973. Excuse me. Yeah, go for it. Skylab was launched in 1973. So, Skylab, being the first U.S. space station, let's pull up a better image here. It was designed to look a lot cooler than this.
Sure about that?
Yes, it looks silly for a couple reasons, and we'll talk about that.
It's a helicopter.
It's a helicopter. So these are solar panels, obviously.
No.
And then here's another bank of solar panels. On the other side of this is radiators. So the Skylab program, the Skylab program was the first U.S. space station. But here's what's interesting about this space station. It was launched as a single piece.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Okay, it wasn't launched as multiple modules. It was launched as a single piece. And it was very big. Can anyone guess as to what kind of rocket would be required to launch something this size?
The N1.
The N1 was the Soviets, and this is a U.S. thing.
Wait, U.S.?
Grover, this was the U.S. Skylab, yeah. No, this is the U.S. Grover.
So what it is that?
It was not the Atlas. It was the Saturn V.
Did I not say Saturn?
Yeah, you just.
Excuse me.
It was the Saturn V. It was modified to launch the Skylab. And when it launched, so really the Skylab is a modified Saturn V third stage. They essentially took the third stage of the Saturn V and hollowed it out and put everything that would be needed to support humans to live inside of it. This is the way that it looked when it launched. Let me just pull this up here. So here's the Saturn V, but instead of the capsule on top with the lunar lander and the fairing underneath, this whole section is Skylab.
So did it prove to be too expensive? Or why do we not send them all at once?
The Saturn V was a beast and was really amazing. I mean, to this day, it is still the most powerful rocket to ever successfully launch. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to build one of these Saturn V's because they, yes, were so expensive. So if we look at this image here. These are Lego models. Here's the redstone. Okay, here's the redstone. This is the Titan. The Titan Gemini. This is the launch escape system test vehicle for the Apollo rocket, which I think it's funny that they had this, but it was just a solid rocket booster with a capsule on top and a escape system. Anyway, this never launched humans. Does anyone remember the name of this guy? 9 redstones strapped together?
Minecraft.
Nope. Yeah, Grover? Apollo 1, that's a great guess. It is a Saturn.
It's Saturn 1.
Redstone block. It is the Saturn 1B.
I was pretty close.
Yeah, very, very close. You said Saturn 1, Elijah. That's the Saturn 1B. This is the Saturn 5 in the configuration to launch the Apollo missions to the moon. And this is the Saturn 5 in the configuration to launch Skylab.
That's a pretty clever solution.
Yeah, just make a space station out of the 3rd stage.
Yeah, it's just like innovate rather than.
Thank you.
I want to recreate all this. How do you not invent yours? How do you make the space station turbo? How do you make it fall so you can move people inside?
So.
A bunch of space trash.
Does all that space trash have docking ports?
I think so.
Then yeah.
Because like there's a touch screen where it hurdles on like a bicycle in ISS. How do I recreate that?
So unfortunately, in Kerbal there is no function to like get them out of their seats and have them go and do stuff in the space stations. But you can cut to an internal view and see them in the space station. Kerbal 2 is going to come out next year. Okay. So shush. Hire maybe. So this diagram shows what the Skylab looked like. Right here. Okay. So the Skylab was folded up. Its solar panels and radiators were folded up here. And then this was the livable section. So this is, remember, the 3rd stage is mostly a fuel tank, right? This is the 3rd stage. In the Saturn V that launched humans to the moon, the Saturn V that launched humans to the moon, this would be full of fuel, giant fuel tanks. But instead of putting fuel tanks in there, they put, beds and science experiments on the walls and oxygen generators and water filtration systems. Okay? So in the Saturn V, and it was actually pretty spacious. It wasn't the Skylab was not a small space station. It was actually very big inside because the Saturn V was a monster.
Did the Saturn V have usually solid rockets?
Nope. Saturn V was all liquid.
So can you recreate that in Kerbal?
Yeah, you could recreate it in Kerbal. Oh yeah. I've made a Saturn V look like in Kerbal. Yeah, it works pretty well. So here is an image of the interior. I'll find some. Yeah, I'll find some more for you.
That's a lot of 20 stages.
Here we go.
Wow.
So he's showering.
Bro, you can see the clouds. Space shower, yo.
What are you showing us? Says Velis. Okay. Shush. Okay, so this is what the interior looks like, right? So you've got an astronaut here. It had 3 levels.
Do you just float up to the other levels?
Yeah, so the other levels were connected by a central, like you would just float through the central section here, this hexagonal. What? You don't.
You just grab
The way that they bathe when they're in orbit is more of like a sponge bath than anything.
You can turn that into like 6 studio apartments.
Yeah, it's pretty spacious. Okay, plenty of room. There's a video. I'm not going to show it to you right now. You can look it up on your own time. Of one of the astronauts actually running around the outside right here, just like running in a circle because his centrifugal force keeps him against the wall. And he just keeps on going. What? It does not spin to create artificial gravity.
Yeah.
So spinning to create artificial gravity is the best way that we figured that we could make gravity in space. Problem is, it would need to be much larger than this. The circumference of your spin needs to be much larger, or your head feels a very different force than your feet.
How does that work? How does spinning it make it simulate gravity?
Same way that a carousel does. Same way that a merry-go-round or one of those like Gravitron 3000 carnival rides, you know, where you always get that random kid that like stands up on the wall while it's going. Yeah, Grover.
Okay, so we said things done orbit.
It is not. It re-entered in 1979. Re-entered the atmosphere in 1979. Broke apart. This is, so the Skylab, the portion of the Skylab that re-entered, this is the thing that littered in Australia. Remember this? Yeah. Australia, so a portion of Skylab landed in the Australian bush. And the, what? I'm not sure. I'm sure more than one. Oh, here it is, right here.
What part of Australia is it?
Everything of Australia.
Well, but like parts of Australia look like west coast United States.
No. So the Australian government sent a. Yeah. No, well, not really. So the Australian government sent a bill to NASA for littering. I am relatively positive that NASA has still not paid that bill.
Is NASA not allowed in Australia?
No, there's NASA stations in Australia, but
If a NASA station is in Australia, they put it in jail.
I don't think so. Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the fine, the littering fine, is still unpaid.
NASA just paid the fine. You have so much money.
All right. NASA doesn't actually have all that much money. Okay. So.
How did it work? But back then they had a lot, right?
Yeah. Okay. Shush. So that was the first U.S. space station. The Soviets had multiple space stations. Their first one, and again we have potato quality here. This is the Salyut. This is the Salyut 1.
The
Salyut. Okay, Salyut 1. It was only in orbit for 6 months. It was only occupied by people for 24 days. So it was in orbit for 6 months. It was occupied by people for 24 days. The Skylab from NASA orbited for 8 years and had a total of 171 occupied days. So about a half of a year, about 6 months total that people actually lived on Skylab. Skylab, I forgot to mention, I apologize.
How did it fall down again?
Remember that in orbit, there's still a little bit of a residual atmosphere that causes some drag. I forgot to mention this. This thing right here, well, so there was supposed to be another panel / radiator array that came off this side. There was supposed to be another one of these that comes off this side. This has radiators on it, which keeps the spacecraft cool. Okay. Well, there was a problem. It broke on ascent. Okay, the Saturn V was not a very smooth ride. It was very bumpy. And this thing that was supposed to be on this side broke on the way up. This is a shade. They literally put a thermal blanket on the outside of Skylab to shield it from the sun so that it wouldn't get too hot. Before they put the thermal blanket on there to shield the sun, it was something like 80 degrees Celsius in the Skylab. Yeah, that is you're dead in like 30 seconds. Okay. So they had to put this blanket on there. They did that with an EVA. So somebody literally got out, put a blanket on the outside of this thing. Okay, so pretty cool. All right, so that's Skylab and Salyut. There were 7 Salyut missions. Okay, all of them were different, actually different spacecraft. We have another potato quality image here. This is Salyut 7, the final Salyut. Salyuts were quite small. They only had a pressurized volume of 90 cubic meters. So they could house a couple of people for a few days. Salyut 7 lasted quite a long time. Salyut 7 lasted quite a long time. It was in orbit for 9 years and had a total of 816 days occupied. So 816 days of people actually going there to live on Salyut 7. Okay.
The Skylab was occupied for 170, right?
Mm-hmm. So here's an interesting one. This is Mir. Let me show you. And Mir is one of the strangest space stations. It looks like a 4-year-old building what he thinks a spaceship should look like with Legos. It's a mess. It looks like there are solar arrays just pointing out at random angles. Yeah. Yeah. It was, yeah, this is the adolescent version of a space station.
This looks like that sketchy factory building in West Dock.
It's kind of a mess. You can see here there are two Soyuz docked to it. So here's a Soyuz, and here's a Soyuz.
This is the drug.
I feel like they just spelled
Drug dealing station.
This is the drug dealer space station.
Like the government was like, we gave you 50 million, it was more.
It's like we gave you 50 million here, but you only spent 20 million. There's another 30 million.
So here's what's interesting. Mir was launched first by the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union collapsed while Mir was in operation.
Oh.
And while it was in operation, there was only, so when the Soviet Union collapsed, there was only one cosmonaut on board. So he did, has anyone seen the movie Terminal with Tom Hanks?
No, it sounds boring.
It's actually really good. But this cosmonaut essentially didn't have a nation because he was in space when his country dissolved, the Soviet Union.
Oh, wow.
Right? So anyway, pretty interesting story. Mir was in orbit for 15 years.
So this was designed by the Soviets.
Yeah,
Go figure.
go figure. Yeah, it is a mess. It was occupied for a total of 4,500 days. So it was occupied the majority of its time. It was in orbit for 5,500 days. It was occupied for 4,500 days. So it was only unoccupied for about 20% of its lifetime, which is pretty good.
How long was
It was occupied for 4,500 days. The Mir, so that's spelled M-I-R in English. If you want to spell it with the Cyrillic text, the Russian letters, it's M backward N P.
Backward N? Isn't that just a U?
Backward N.
How do you
Yeah,
write
isn't
that?
that just a U?
No, that would be upside down.
Would that just still be an N?
No.
Mir.
We're talking about capitals here.
Well, it's backwards. Lowercase n with capital Y.
So this is this is the insignia for Mir. Okay, so the Soviet Union and Russia and the United States are not the only countries to have launched space shuttles. Sorry, space stations. There is one more country that has successfully launched a space station. Does anyone want to take a guess?
China, Turkey.
China. Turkey? No.
That was my first guess.
Israel.
Israel.
No, they've actually had stuff launched by SpaceX.
It's true. They attempted to land on the moon. They landed on the moon, just not softly. Okay. Not with people, obviously, but anyway. So here's our best image of the second Chinese space station. It is named Tiangong 2. Here is Tiangong 2. And yes, this is a model.
Why is every image of the potato ball?
Okay, it's pretty small. Pretty small, but here's some images of the So here are the two taikonauts that occupied the Tiangong 2.
Hold on, man. I can't get over the.
Tiangong. 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 So Tiangong 2, Tiangong means space castle or sky castle, I believe. So I think it's always so funny to see astronauts standing up in a space station
They don't stand.
because they're not standing. Like most of the time they've got their feet hooked onto handles or like velcroed to the floor. Because their bodies just float, and you can see that their clothes fit them strangely. Okay.
That's why I have a petition to make all astronauts naked.
What?
What?
So China will be launching their next. So China has launched 2 space stations, Tiangong 1 and Tiangong 2. They'll be launching another one in the coming years. But of course, the most famous space station is the one that most people refer to as the space station. It is the International Space Station, the ISS. Here's the International Space Station with the space shuttle docked to it.
Big solar panel.
Yep.
There's some big boys.
Yep, huge solar panels. The space station has been built over a long period of time and has been continuously, has been continuously occupied for the past 20 years. So the space station has had people living on board it for 20 years straight. That's a beautiful image. So here you can see the occupied portions. We have these modules here. So this is what's called the international side, or really the US built side. And this over here is the Russian built side. These are just, these are where the batteries and obviously solar panels and radiators are. None of this is occupied. So this is not occupied at all. The occupied portions are these portions right here.
Are there any Canadian arms?
There are, yes, there is a Canada arm on there. The Canada arm too.
Yes.
Because Canada does robotic arms. That's all they do. The Canadian Space Agency really is, we build robotic arms for space. That's what we do.
We can help things.
But they're really good.
Yeah, they're fantastic. There it is. Canada. Thanks, Canada. You contributed. Thumbs up. Yeah.
I feel like the US is like Canada's like US like little brothers that fine.
Fine.
They're actually small. You like I feel like that means giving Canada the space control.
So the International Space Station has had over 100 astronauts stay on board it during its lifetime.
100
Yep, over 100 astronauts have lived on the space station. since the beginning. This so it was built out over time, the space station. It didn't always look the way that it does today. So this was in the 90s, when they were building the space station. Just a few parts. Okay. So those are the space stations. That's all I wanted to talk about today. Make sure to like and subscribe or whatever.